This is the first and likely the last time you'll ever hear this sentence come out of my mouth. We have some good news regarding Blackwater. It's like a shock to the system just to say it. So for those of you who don't know, Blackwater is a private defense contractor that was used in Iraq to protect high-level diplomats. And they're essentially a private army that was that the U.S. was outsourcing fighting to. So it's the cover story is that, well, they were just used for security, but there are so many stories that were leaked from Iraq at the time during the war that showed how they weren't really just for security. They also did quite a bit of fighting on their own. Well, 7 years after an incident called the Massacre Square Massacre, 4 Blackwater guards have been found guilty of charges ranging from murder to manslaughter to attempted manslaughter and also for gun violations. And during the incident, so this is something that the media didn't talk about nearly as much as they should have spoken about it. This is something that, honestly, this should have been on a loop for weeks straight, and this is something that we should be reminded of year after year as to why you shouldn't have private military people fighting a war. But what happened is 4 Blackwater guards went to Massacre Square, and they killed 14 Iraqis. Killed 14 Iraqis, wounded 17 other people. Not a single one was a terrorist or an insurgent or anything. And the jury found that everything about the slaughter was totally unprovoked. The argument that they used to defend themselves was, no, we saw a car roll in, and the car we thought was a car bomb. Now, they didn't present any evidence of that, and they didn't give us any reason why they would think that. And they also said that they heard some sort of gunfire in the background. Apparently, according to the evidence at the scene, that is not the reality. They were not able to convince the jury of that. So it really does look like the people of Blackwater rolled into a square, just opened fire, and started killing people. Now, I was scared for a very, very long time, and I got to be honest with you, I thought until very recently that there was going to be no justice here, because it's commonly brought up that when you talk about mercenary armies, which is what Blackwater is, the problem with that is they're not really under any kind of specific law. They're not really answerable to international law. They're not really answerable to the laws in the country where they are. We would need to somehow find a way to try them under U.S. law, which is what it looks like that's more or less what happened. For the longest time, people weren't sure that this would even come to trial and that these guys would just walk free because, again, if you're part of a mercenary army, you're really not under any particular law, or there's a giant gray area as to what law you have to abide by. So for the longest time, myself included, I thought, well, there's no way that there's going to be justice done here, and this is the problem with mercenary armies to begin with, is that they are in this legal gray area. But thankfully, they did have a trial, and even more thankfully, they were found guilty, because this is a moment right now where we actually should be somewhat proud. Clearly, we should be outraged and pissed off that Blackwater existed in the first place and did what they did. They changed their name 3 or 4 times since then because of all the different scandals and whatnot. But today, we should be happy because when something like that happens, all we can ask for after the fact is justice be done. And this is one story on top of another story that we had probably a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that actually brought a smile to my face in terms of the justice system. We were able to get Osama bin Laden's nephew, was it? I think it was his nephew. We got him on terrorism charges, and we actually gave him a trial, and he was found guilty, and now his punk ass is going to jail. So that's how you do it. See, this is all progressives have been asking for from day one, is that in order to show the world that we are enlightened, that we are civilized, that we are not savages and barbarians and, the marauding, crusading, imperialistic West. In order to show that we actually stand up for our values and our principles, we have to abide by our values and our principles. We can't just throw away due process when the going gets tough and when there's some sort of a gray area. No, the more you stick to those principles and those values and the more you abide by due process, the more you actually can go to the world and say, no, we are an example and we are doing the right thing and this system is superior and everybody should adopt a system like this or similar to this where you do have some sort of judicial process to correct anything that's happening that might be wrong. So the next step, as we've discussed before, I don't want to get off into a big side rant here, but the next thing that we're waiting for to take a similar step where we do get justice, Guantanamo Bay. Because this is the elephant in the room when you talk about not abiding by due process, not abiding by the Constitution, not actually standing up for our principles and our values. The fact that right now we still have people being held in an extrajudicial way. Meanwhile, we pretend when we go around the world like all we care about is freedom and what is right. Well, if that was the case, maybe Guantanamo Bay wouldn't exist.